Pete Charette is back on Game of Crimes, talking about his international undercover narcotics role, the French Connection, Operation Southern Comfort, working behind the Iron Curtain. What else is he going to talk about? Stay tuned. Here we go.
Hey to all you players, welcome back to Game of Crimes with Murph in the morning. This week's episode is very special, just like every week's episode, but it really is special this week because I'm bringing back an old friend. And if you remember, we had this gentleman on. Now, this was before we were posting on YouTube, so you haven't seen him before, but we had today's guest on episode 92 back in April of 2023. And our guest today is, I used to call him Boss. I probably still will call him Boss today. But we're very honored to bring back a gentleman, a true patriot, a man who served his country unbelievably well. You've heard some of his stories if you heard his last episode, and wait till you hear today. But it's my honor to welcome back Pete Charette. Brother Pete, thank you for coming back, man.
Thank you for having me, and I miss you, pal, and I wish we could do it all over again.
Yeah, those were the days, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
I tell you what, and we'll get into it here just a little bit more, and after we go through what we regularly call our small town police blotter. And Pete is originally French Canadian, so he came from Canada. So it's only appropriate that I find a stupid criminal story from Canada, and just like they have theirs up there as well.
Okay.
All right, so we're talking about Canadian cops going after a cocaine bust. So Canadian border agents today arrested, this wasn't today, this is in the past, arrested a woman who arrived at the Montreal airport carrying 3 pumpkins stuffed with, what do you think, pumpkin seeds? I don't think so. The Halloween seizure netted nearly 2 kilos of cocaine, according to the Canada Border Services Agency. Now Pete, you ever seen that technique before, hiding cocaine in a pumpkin?
Never.
Me either. The pumpkins discovered during a search of the woman's luggage. Now, they seemed heavy for their size, so the investigators, being the astute criminal investigators they are, they x-rayed those pumpkins, and they discovered suspicious masses inside. Further investigation revealed that the pumpkins contained bags filled with the cocaine. Another CBSA photo shows a white powder on the tip of a knife that investigators plunged into one of the pumpkins. I thought they only did that on TV. Anyway, the cocaine was turned over to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is expected to file narcotics charges against the woman whose identity was not disclosed by investigators. And just so you know, a kilo of coke, and this was a little bit surprising because I thought it would be more, a kilo of coke can sell for in excess of $20,000 wholesale in the United States. Now, I thought that was quite a bit more than that, but I guess I've been out of the game a little bit too long, Pete. What do you think?
I think the cost is a little bit too low from what they're saying because it's extremely higher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's we never saw it that cheap when we were down in Miami, and that was, gosh, I'm thinking, if I remember correctly, it was like $26,000 a kilo was the cheapest I ever heard back then.
Yeah, because I used to, when I was working undercover, it was $28,000 a kilo.
Yeah. I talked to some folks in Europe and in Australia especially. Even today, kilo of coke's going for $100,000, 1 kilo in Australia, and that's wholesale. So
unbelievable.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into our Florida story because we being in Florida now, and actually Pete's up in Georgia. I almost sent you a Georgia criminal story because I came across a good one, but we'll save that for another time. But our small-town police blotter from Florida is this Floridian, 71 years old, nabbed in water pistol attack. Keyword there being piss, okay? So this is an older case from Florida that I found. This gentleman was armed with a water gun filled with his own urine. Oh, that's nasty. An elderly Florida man squirted a woman several times as she walked her dog in front of his residence, according to a criminal complaint. Police charged that Joel Benjamin, 71 years old, approached the female victim around 9:30 p.m., pulled out a water gun that contained his own urine, And the woman, now she's 50 years old, she was walking her dog outside the seaside villas located in Gulfport, Florida. Benjamin and the victim live in separate apartments in the same complex, so they're neighbors. When questioned by a Gulfport Police Department officer, Benjamin reportedly admitted that he shot the victim with a water gun containing his own urine. The septuagenarian was not remorseful, stating that he would do it again. Once wasn't enough. While court filings do not indicate why Benjamin targeted the woman, a source said that the defendant may have been angered by fellow residents failing to curb their dogs, so he decided to take it out on her. Benjamin was arrested on a misdemeanor battery charge, booked into the Pinellas County Jail, spent about 18 hours in custody before being released on a $500 bond. The attack, police said, did not cause bodily harm to the victim, but there's an update to this. So within a couple of days of his arrest, in a later interview, Benjamin said that, quote, I lost my effing temper and shot her in the face with my squirt gun filled with my piss. Calling the act an egregious thing to do. That's one word you could use, egregious. Benjamin said that he did not target the victim due to a neighborhood dispute. Instead, he spun a tale about being under government surveillance since his 2011 firing from a state job in New York, claiming that the woman he soaked with urine was a paid snitch keeping tabs on him. Come on now. You know what? That's the way you can't make this shit up. There's crazy people everywhere, aren't they?
Crazy world right now. I'll tell you
It
what.
is.
I told my wife the other day, if things don't change, and God forbid, and I'm not trying to play politics here, but the way this country right now is, and it's shameful. Mm-hmm. And I told her, I says, if a woman who wants to run for president is elected, we're moving to Canada.
All righty. Boy, there's so many places we could go with that, but like you said, we're not going to go into politics. Maybe on the Patreon channel, we might do it over there, but not here. We want to have some fun and get into your background. Now, just so everybody knows, the way Pete and I know each other, when I was a young agent in Miami, and this was back in the 1980s, Pete became my ASAC, which is an assistant special agent in charge, and that's 2 levels above me. So he's my boss's boss. And that's when I was putting in for Columbia. Pete didn't hesitate, supported me 100% to go down to Bogota, be stationed there for a few years. I'd been in Miami for 4 years. Loved that. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know if you remember this, Pete, but there was a payback. You asked me to go to Haiti for 2 weeks before I transferred to South America. And so I went down with, I just forgot his name. He was in tech unit. Who's that?
He was in the tech unit. Not my brother.
Well, he was one of the boat captains I went down with, right. Him and John Mantilla.
Oh, yeah.
And, the guy's an artist now. He's one of my friends.
The artist that does all the beautiful pictures there.
Yeah,
I know who you're talking about. But
it'll come to me probably when we finish the recording. And I will apologize to him on the next recording. I can't believe I can't remember his name. I can see his face plain as day. But anyway, we went down. We got there on a Monday. Then that's when Joe Greco was the country attaché down there. Got off that plane. I got to be honest with you, that was one of the nastiest places I'd ever been to in my life, from just what you see and what you smelled. I mean, it was terrible. But anyway, got there on Monday. By Thursday, I had food poisoning, or I don't know, amoebas or whatever it was. But on Friday, you guys medevaced me back to the United States. I never made it through the first week down there.
To be very honest with you, I went there when I was a NASAC, and when I retired, believe it or not, State Department called me up and said, we would like to offer you, would you accept to become chief of police in Haiti? And I had trained when they had their revolt there. I had trained for 3 months Haitian police officers in Guantanamo, and they offered me the job to be the police chief, and I said no. Because it's a shame. It's not a safe place, and I feel bad because there's some great people there, and I have some great friends there, but it is a bad place to go. It's not safe. And it's a shame that things are happening like they are right now.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember the agent's name, Lou Digney.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Good old Lou.
I tell you what, things up here aren't as sharp as they used to be.
Yeah, John, very honest with you, when I went to Haiti and met with the officials there when I was the ASAC, I met with them and I said, look, we're getting information that Haiti now is becoming a landing place for Pablo Escobar's shipments, etc. And I said, we want your assistance. And they said, we don't want anybody's assistant. And I looked at him and I said, quote, and excuse what I'm going to say, I said, you know what, sir? You're a piece of shit. Have a good day. And I walked out.
Yep. Yep.
And corruption there is livid. And it's a shame because there's some great people there. And what's going on, it's becoming a crazy world, Steve.
Yeah. Well, after Escobar was killed, that's when we had a walk-in informant come in down in Bogota and talk to Javier and I. And he admitted to making payoffs to the current president of Haiti, which was Jean-Bertrand Aristide, paying him, if I remember correctly, it was $400,000 a month. It may have been more than that. But in exchange, Aristide was letting the Colombian drug traffickers land their drug planes on Haitian military airstrips, and then they would put it on coastal freighters and go-fast boats to bring it into South Florida. And we were going to indict the president of Haiti, Aristide. But we got one of those phone calls from down through the chain of command that came from the White House that says, you're not indicting him. So, and if you remember correctly, our president at the time gave Aristide asylum in the United States and then reinstated him sometime later as president of Haiti. Politics again.
It's a shame. And when I became the ASAC there and I had all the office in the Caribbean under my command, I got information from our office in the Dominican Republic. And he called me up and he said, Pete, we just busted a guy last night landing, and he was bringing a shipment of cocaine. He had up $500,000 when we arrested him on the strip, and he was the brother of the guy that was running to become president of Colombia. Mm-hmm. And he says, we have a picture of him, and his brother also had offered the undercover agent, said, have him send me $250,000 and we'll stand behind him and during his covert operation. So I sent the pictures and sent it to D.C. and I said, look, now you got a guy that's running for president. Here's what I got. We need to act on this. And next thing you know, I was told, what's his name? Oh my God, President, his wife was
Clinton.
And I said, we need to publicize this. And because he's going to be elected president and we're not going to get cooperation. And they told me, Clinton said, no, back off, and we're not publishing this. What a disgrace that was. And we had the proof, and we were told no. And I wanted to pick up the phone, personally call Mr. Clinton, and tell him what I thought about it. You know me, I go right for the jugular. I could care less if it's the President of the United States or what. It was the most disastrous and disgraceful thing I have been told. We could have exposed this, and we were denied. Politics.
Yep. And he was the president that wouldn't allow us to indict Aristide. And if you look later in life, what's the foundation that he and his wife have? Oh, it's the Haitian Foundation. But so let's move on. Let's don't talk about them anymore. They're has-beens, right? Also, I wanted to mention to you, Pete, that you remember Florida International University. So they were, if you remember, they were offering master's classes they'd come over to the DEA training room. We'd have classes once a week, I think, for 4.5 hours, one night a week. And just maybe 2 weeks ago, Javier and I got to go down to FIU, spend the whole day with them down there, the Department of Public Policy and International Policy. Third time we've been down there to speak. And the reason I'm wearing this shirt, and it says Pitbull, is I didn't know this, but you don't know this. Pitbull is, I like Pitbull. I like his music, but what I like about him is that he will tell you, and I've seen him do it on film. This is where I developed my like for him. He was talking to people who didn't appreciate living in the United States, and he said, hey, I grew up in a communist country. I was able to escape and come to this country, and if you don't like the United States, you can get the F out. So that elevated him in my opinion.
Yeah.
And what I found out at FIU, he's donating $6 million to the university, and in exchange, they're putting Mr. 305 is his name. I guess that's a nickname they've given him because he's in Miami. And in exchange, he gets his name on their football stadium. I think it's for 10 years. But $6 million just to help a local university. And I thought that was pretty admirable.
Yeah.
So enough so that I got a T-shirt. One of those things, you've been there, done that. And I thought you'd appreciate it, having your experience in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
But again, you know what? And before we get into, I really want to get into this Operation Southern Comfort. But before we do, I want to remind everybody about your background, where you grew up, what your family dynamics were, where you went to school, your siblings, especially your brother, Gil. Just tell some things about that.
Well, I came to the United States when I was 9 years of age. My father had health issues because of the winter and all that, and the doctor says you got to go to a warm climate. He had been to Florida with his brother-in-law, and so we moved to Florida, and of course, I didn't speak a word of English. I was a French kid, and I had two brothers. One of them was Gil and my brother John, and when I was in Canada, I observed coming out of school, going to my dad's restaurant with my two brothers, and I stopped at a traffic crossing, and my brother Gil said to me, he says, what are you looking at? And I said, that gentleman over there, he's got a uniform. He says, yeah, that's a police officer. I kept looking at him, and I said, Gil, someday I'm going to be a policeman. And that was my goal, 9 years old. Mm-hmm. And it came to light. And we moved to Florida. And funny story, when we went to school, my first time, I said to my dad, hey, Dad, I don't speak English. What am I going to do? He said, listen here, son. If the teacher asks you something, and if it sounds good, say yes. And if it doesn't sound good, say no. Those were the two English words that I learned. And eventually, I grew up, and my goal was to become a police officer. As a result, in the military police during Vietnam, my brother Gil was in Vietnam, and I had applied to go as a military police officer to Vietnam. Next thing you know, I ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Sandia Base, which was the atomic storage depot and where the atomic bomb was first came to light. Mm-hmm. And I loved what I was doing. And as an MP, I was told by the Provost Marshal, we want you to represent us for Military Police Officer of the Year. I was shocked. And he says, you got 3 months to study on everything and you'll be interviewed. And long story short, I was interviewed. Next thing you know, I became Police Officer of the Year. And what an honor that was. My parents called me and says the sheriff in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, wants to talk to you. And my mother gave me the phone number, so I called. He got on the phone, and he says, Pete, I'm a retired provost marshal. And he says, I read in the Army Times that you were selected Police Officer of the Year for the military. And I said, yes, sir. And he says, are you going to re-up? I said, well, they want me to re-up. $25,000 bonus. I was a Spec 4 in those days. And he says, no, you're coming to work for me.
Okay.
So I said, yes, sir. So 3 months later, I came to Florida, became a deputy sheriff with the Broward Sheriff's Office, road patrol, and throughout my time as a deputy, I made cases. I didn't believe in just patrolling, and I read every statute there is in the Florida statute for criminal violations. And I started doing my own investigation as a patrolman and broke up one of the biggest car smuggling operation in Florida. I was making cases as a deputy, and 8 months later, I was promoted to detective.
8 months on the job.
Beg your pardon?
8 months on the job, and you made detective.
8 months on the job, and how that happened is that I came across a gentleman that was laying in the gutter in front of a bar in the black section of Fort Lauderdale. It was raining like hell, and I pulled over, and I got out, and bouncer at the door says, "Oh, he's been there. He's a drunk, and he's been laying in the gutter there." And so I went over, and I kicked him on his feet, and I said, "Hey, get up." And he had a bottle of scotch in his hand, and I leaned down, and he whispered to me, "Get away from me. I'm a cop." And I looked at him. I said, "You son of a bitch. You're not worth it. Goodbye. If you get run over, that's your problem." And I took off. Well, when I came in at midnight, he was there at the department, and he goes, "Can I speak to you?" I go, "Yeah." And he introduced himself. He says, "I'm the head of narcotics here, and there's only two of us." And he says, "You reacted immediately." He says, "What the hell? How old are you?" He says, "You look like you're 18 years old." I said, "No, I'm 21. And he goes, "I want to thank you. I made a heroin deal. I busted a heroin operation that night." And he says, "You reacted immediately." And he says, "You'll be seeing me soon." Next thing, I get promoted as a detective.
What year was that?
That was in 1967. And when I got promoted, they assigned me to narcotics and vice. I started undercover work from that time, and for almost 26 years of my life, that's all I did all over the world. And my goal was, when I started in narcotics, and I dealt with heroin suppliers who were selling street drugs and all that, I made myself a promise. I said, someday I'm going to become a federal agent, because I was doing undercover work for the old FBN, Federal Bureau of Narcotics in Miami. They only had like 7 agents in that time. And they used me to do undercover stuff for them. I was posing as a Canadian mobster, and I made cases with them. And then that's when I got the phone call while I was going to college, getting my police degree. I got a phone call from Ben Tyson. I don't know if you remember Ben Tyson. He used to call him the Batman. He was from old FBN at school, and they said, "The director in Miami wants to see you immediately." Well, I figured they wanted to use me for an undercover operation. So I immediately blue lighted to Miami. I get there at about 9:30 at night. Secretary's waiting at the door. She says, "Ben's waiting for you." And we called him the Batman. And he looked like a mafioso, one of the most wonderful person I ever met in my life. And he says, "Sit down, keep your mouth shut, Frenchie. Get me Washington on the line right now." Next thing, Steve, Washington's on the line. He goes, "Okay, I got him here." He says he will accept the job, not as a grade 5, but as a grade 9. He's got 8 years of undercover experience, and he speaks French fluently, not State Department French. And he's your man. And he hung up. "Okay, thank you," and hung up. He says, "Frenchie, tomorrow, come in, 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm swearing you in. You're becoming a FBN agent." And I looked at him and I said, "Ben, what in the hell is going on?" He said, "Frenchie, Nixon said we need to get the French connection dismantled for all the heroin they're supplying to the United States. And they had put out a bolo and says, find us a fluent French-speaking, not State Department French, who has worked narcotics. We need him to go to France and work undercover with the French police to dismantle the French connection. 3 months later, I was in Paris, posing as a Canadian mobster, and my career, and I have made a goal in my career in narcotics that I would bring down the biggest mobsters in the United States and Europe who were dealing and sending heroin to the United States. And I worked for almost 6 years undercover, posing as a mobster in France, making some of the biggest cocaine conspiracies they ever made. And then all over Europe, I worked in Belgium, I worked in Germany, I worked behind the Black Country in Belgrade, made the first heroin case in the world. In the Black Country, I uncovered the first heroin lab. And my goal was to put these SOB in jail. And that's what I did for almost 26 years with BNDD all over the world, as you well know. And I was proud to it because I wanted to put these bastards in jail, and I could care less about politics. And people in Washington used to say, Frenchie, you can't do this. Bullshit. I'm doing it, and you watch me. And I was successful. I had the best team in the world, best agents in the world. You're one of them. And it was an honor. And I think when I came to Miami and was assigned to be ASAC, and I took over the Caribbean in Group 10, the best years of my career with you and that team. And we kicked ass, Steve. And I'm proud to have done what I did for this country.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that too. A really good friend of both of us, Tommy Golden, we had him here on the show just recently. He has some great stories. He's a hoot. Yeah, he's episode 158 for our listeners. If you want to go back and listen to him, Tommy is he's one of those guys once you meet him, you'll never forget him. Love that guy.
We stay in communication with each other. We talk about you all the time.
Oh.
And believe it or not, my last day, if you remember when I retired, there was a party at the office there, and Tommy came up to me. That's when he was in training, and he goes, Frog, we got to go. He said, Shula wants to say goodbye to you.
Don Shula.
Okay, Tommy, get me out of here, because it was a great party, but people, secretaries, oh, Pete, we're going to miss you and all that, it made my heart pound because they were the greatest people that I ever worked with. And your group, you guys were the top on my list. It was at ASAC. When I took over, I said, you guys are going to go travel because the previous boss restricted people from going in the Caribbean where you guys were. And I said, this is bullshit. You're going to go liaison, and we're going to kick ass. That's my style. And I could care less what Washington said. And Tom Cash backed me up because Tom asked me to become an ASAC in Miami when I was in D.C. He had, I think there was 5 positions that had to be filled. And he told the director, Lon, my good friend, and he said, you pick who you want, but there's only one person that I want, and that's Pete. And he's going to come up here because liaison is bad. And I always told you guys, liaison, and you will make cases if you do liaison. That's something that a lot of officers and people didn't believe in, that type of thing. I was there not as a boss. I was there as an agent, one of you guys. And that's how I lived, and that was my career. And we kicked ass, and we made some of the biggest cases in the history of this country. And it was an honor, and I can't say enough now. Tommy, I speak to him all the time. And
Yeah.
my last day after I left the office for the party, Tommy says, we got to go. Shula wants to see you. We went down to the Dolphin camp in Davie and sat down with the Don and all that. And we just chit-chatted and all that. And I said, look, I want to thank you. It was an honor working with you and your guys. And I said, where's Danny at?
Marino. Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, well, he's in therapy back there. And I says, okay. So I said my goodbyes to him. And so Tommy he's a good friend of Marino. They went to college together, and he was a roommate of Danny Marino. And he says, Frog, let's go. Danny's there. So we went and saw Danny. Hey, guys, how you doing? All that. And he says, Pete, this is his retirement. This is his last day on the job. Danny says, I'm going to be done in 15 minutes. You're coming to the house. Next thing you know, Tommy and I went to his house, spent 5 hours there, and we had a blast. Danny all of a sudden told Claire, his wife, says, go get the box for Pete. Next thing you know, football autograph, shirt, and everything to my main man, Pete, and all that. Was one of the greatest goodbyes I had, and Tommy did that for me. And I think the world of Tommy, and we stay in touch with each other, and he thinks the world of you.
Yeah, and for our listeners that might not recognize those names, Don Shula was a legendary coach of the Miami Dolphins back in the day, and his star quarterback was Dan Marino. So that's who, when we're talking about Danny and Don, that's who we're talking about.
Yeah.
The only thing I ever felt bad about for Dan Marino was that he did not, as good as he was, he never got that Super Bowl championship ring. And if somebody deserved it, I think he did.
He regretted that, and we talked about that, and it's a shame, and that was his goal. And so now Tommy stays in touch with him, and I'm going to Florida here shortly for Thanksgiving to see my wife's family and my grandkids, and I hope that I'll have a chance to go and say hello to him again. So I had a great career, and Steve, I'm honored to be here on your show.
Well, thank you, buddy. Thank you. And you mentioned your brother Gil. Now, Gil, he was military police, but then did he come to DEA or FBN first, or did you?
What happened is Gil was in the Air Force, and he was in Anchorage, Alaska, and he had been to Vietnam. A lot of people didn't know that the background that Gil had. Gil in Vietnam was on a special team, hunt and kill the Vietnamese force people that were engaged in the war, and he went on a hunt and kill mission. He was wounded and saved people's life and had 3 silver medals, and he never talked about it. And he was published on the Miami Herald front page that he had saved 15 people in a bunker that was being hit with mortars and all that, and it was on fire. He ran in there, got them all out. It blew up. He got shrapnel all over his back and all that. And my mother passed out when she saw the newspaper, and he never told us about this. And he was, when he retired, called me up from Alaska. He says, Pete, I can't take it anymore. He says, he was like a sergeant major, and he said, I give orders to guys, and he said, they tell me, F you, and he says, I want to take him out, and you get me a job with the sheriff's department. I said, it's done. Within 24 hours, he was hired by BSO, the sheriff, came in, he worked on the road for about a month, became a detective. Wow. And he did great. And then he called me one day and he said, any chance of me going to work for you guys? Make a phone call. Made the phone call. Deputy director for enforcement called him up, and I says, I'm cashing in. You owe me. My brother wants to apply to become an agent. He says, Frenchie, done.
Nice.
And then call me. Gil became an agent, and as you well know, he came to Miami, and he spent his career there, and he was a boat captain working undercover. And unfortunately, he had a heart attack after he retired and died. But then we found out his son called me up and said, Uncle Pete, we reached underneath the bed in the house. Mom told us that his medals were in a box there. He didn't want people to know. And he had 16 medals. And he was wounded, shot, etc., and saw his buddies being neck sliced while he was on a hunt mission. And he suffered quite a while from that. But he served his country well, and God bless him. And so my family became cops. I got a brother now who retired from Dade Metro. He was lieutenant of narcotics, and he lives up here. And I've had a blessed career. I was blessed with a special talent. And you guys and I met some of the best agents in the world. And I wish they were doing what we did, because things have changed, unfortunately.
Yes, I agree with you. And for our listeners, you heard Pete make reference to the French Connection, and if you watch the movies, there's a movie out about it, all that. Here's a guy who actually did the Undercover. So if you haven't heard episode 92, go back and listen to that, because that's where Pete talks about all of his work there, all the exciting things he did, and the results of the case. I mean, it was famous. That was everybody. But in '67, heck, I was 11 years old. So it was, I mean, this is infamous. It's out there. There's something and it's worth listening to, is what I'm trying to say here. So, but I appreciate that. My first undercover, I got to Miami in 1987, and in early 88, we went to the Turks and Caicos Islands. If you remember, Gene Frankar was my senior partner. Gene had been working this case. Gino. Yeah, Gino was, he had developed this case, and the focus of the case was to prove that Cuba was being used as a transshipment point for cocaine coming out of Colombia into South Florida. So they, said, well, listen, we need the undercover boat. Back then we had that 53-foot Hatter sport fisherman. The two undercover captains was your brother Gil and John Mantilla, two complete opposites. And they said, we need one of the young guys to volunteer to be a deckhand. Well, I'm his junior partner. And I was like, I'll go. So I've never been on the ocean, except when my wife and I got married, we went on a honeymoon cruise, and that's a whole lot different than being on the ocean in a boat. And Gil and John got us it took us 5 days to get down to Turks and Caicos Islands. Of course, typical drug deal didn't go the first time. So they stayed down there, I think, for 2 weeks on the boat. I'm like, nah, send me back to Miami. We were all kind of sick from getting rough weather going down there. So I came back with Gino. 2 weeks later, we fly back down. We do the undercover deal. Now, I had been a cop for 12 years before I joined DEA. The most powder cocaine I'd ever seen was 2 ounces baggage. This load, we picked up 400 kilos. I mean, it was most exciting thing I think I'd ever done in my life at that point. And I tell everybody, after that deal, I was addicted to cocaine, just in a different way. But what a blast. What a blast.
Well, you talk about Cuba. Well, one of the things that John Pulley, who was the head of the Operation Bat in the Bahamas, and I got a phone call one day from John, and he says, Pete, I've had it. So what's up, Pat? He says, we're chasing a guy and with the OPBAT program, and I'm in the helicopter. The guy's heading, and he's fleeing towards the Cuban zone. And he says, Pete, we got to do something. We can't communicate. And the State Department says only the Coast Guard's allowed to communicate. And I said, John, follow him in, cross the line, get the bastard. The hell with Department of State. I'll take full responsibility. Well, he went in, communicated directly with the Cubans, and got the guys. And then the call came in. The ambassador from Nassau calls me up His name was Chick Heck. Great guy. Loved him to death. I got along great. And he goes, Pete, what the hell happened? State Department's calling me and pulling I says, Chick, I gave the order. I'm to blame. I didn't call Washington. I took it because this is bullshit. He goes, good job, Pete. Next thing you know, I get a call from Washington from the director. What in hell have you done? State Department's calling. I said, boss, let me tell you something. I don't seek permission. I do it because I have to do it. The law is the law. And I says, we don't ask permission from Coast Guard to intercept these people. They've been doing this for years, and we've allowed it. From now on, I gave the order, and next thing you know, Cuban authorities called John and says, come and get them. They're yours. The shipment is yours for your evidence. The boat is ours. And from here on, we will deal directly with you. And that's how we got cooperation. That was the first time that we got cooperation with the Cubans.
Wow.
I caught some, hellacious phone calls from State Department. I would say, F you. I'm the boss. I'm the ASAC. This cocaine goes back to the United States, and you guys are allowing this to happen. We now communicate directly with the Cubans. There's a picture in my book of me and these two guys getting off the plane with John Pulley, coming into Miami Airport. The media was all over the place, and we established communication, and still this day, as far as I know, they're still cooperating with us. I don't care. Policy, Clinton told us that we had no business to have military operation and radars, etc. And he put a halt, and he says, bull S. And we fought that, and we won the battle. But he didn't want us to work in the Caribbean.
Unbelievable.
Politics, you know what? If it was the President of the United States that was doing something wrong, I wouldn't ask permission. I'd go for him, and I'd arrest him. That's what's my style, and I think, Steve, you knew that.
Yep, and that's what, ladies and gentlemen, that's what you call a supervisor with a set of balls. You make a command decision,
I was not trying
and then you stand behind it.
I was not trying to make a name for myself. It's just that I felt, I was a boss, ASAC, at a very young age. But I felt I'm an agent. The law is the law. I followed the law. And I don't care if it was the director, etc. And I had words with a couple of directors, told one of them he was a piece of shit. He was a trooper, ex-trooper.
We know who you're talking about.
Huh?
We all know who you're talking about now.
You know who I'm talking about. And he had called. I had seen an internal affairs agents walking past my office, and it was Mike Pavlik. I don't know if you remember him. And I said, Mike, what are you doing? Because, my door was always open. And, my secretary says, well, everybody's got to go through me. I said, this changes. That door is open. I don't care if it's the Pope. He walks in. I have an open door, and I am one of them. That was my policy. And you remember, you knew that I supported the guys, and I didn't interfere. I was there to support you because I was one of you. And as a result, I said to Pavlik, I said, Mike, what are you doing here? He says, Pete, I know we're supposed to contact you and Tom, but we got an investigation, and the old man, trooper, said, don't report to the Miami office. It was an allegation against an agent who was going home, stopped by a 7-Eleven to get a quart of milk on his way to the house. And he said, investigate this guy, unauthorized use of a government vehicle. So I said, Mike, thank you. Don't worry about it. And I go down and I saw cash. Tom, he says, what's going on? I says, we got a problem. What's the problem? I told him. I just told you. He goes, Jesus Christ. And I says, get the trooper director on the phone now. He says, Pete, don't go there. He said, you brought me here to straighten out liaison and to make you famous once again. And I said, get him on the phone. He goes, Frenchie, be careful. I said, get him on the phone. He got him on the phone. And he told him, he says, Mike Pavlik is here, blah, blah, blah. And he said that he was told not to tell us why he was here. And he says, that's my call. And I said, bullshit. I said, you violated your own memo that they had to communicate with us. And I said, you violated your own. How dare you talk to me that way? I said, you know what? Go to hell. And I hung up. Cash goes, Jesus Christ. And that's when I called the girl at in administration Miami. I says, am I eligible for retirement before I'm fired? And she came back. She says, yeah, because if you stay till 57, she said, you'll be working like you were working at McDonald's. That's all it is. I says, bring me the papers. I'll sign them, Tom. I just resigned. He goes, you can't do that, Frenchie. I said, Tom, it's not DEA anymore. And this guy, violated his own policy. And if it was one of us that violated the policy, he'd have our ass. And that's why I retired.
The truth of the matter is, an infraction like that, it's not like you went out and committed armed robbery or murdered somebody. The hours that we were working in South Florida back then, if you weren't working 80 hours a week, you weren't doing anything. Right. And your kid at home needs some milk, and you're going to swing by on your way home. You're not going out of your way. You just stop off. It's not like you're picking up a case of beer. Right. It's just, and that's that was his priority.
One of the things that I was a firm believer, and I think you remember this, and JB, God bless him, John Brown, who passed away, our good friend, and he was your boss.
Yeah.
And he was 53 years, my friend and close friend. I went to his funeral here a few months ago, and I had told JB, I said, JB, things are going to change. And I said, one of you, these guys here are good, but they were held back from doing traveling, liaison in the Caribbean, etc. I says, it's a new day. Here's the policy. They go, I support them, and we're going to make cases. And I demanded that from all my field office when I was in charge of all the offices in Florida. And I told the guys, I said, look, I've looked at the case log of your office, etc. You got 20 people there, 8 are making cases. What the hell is the other ones doing? Sitting around and riding waves? I said, it's going to change. You better tell them that they better start a liaison and making cases, or else they'll be looking at Alaska and they'll be looking at the worst place in the world to be transferred to. And that was my goal, and we got things going, and we were kicking hell all over the state of Florida.
Yep. I gotta say, I really do miss those days. That was it was a lot of fun, but we were making a positive impact. We were earning our taxpayer-paid salaries.
Yes.
And for our listeners here, you're hearing the inside, the dirty side, a little bit of the dirty side of the DEA, because everything's not perfect. It's the movies makes it out to be what it's really not. We have conflicts. You got all those type A personalities in there, and when your boss tells you to do something, you better do it. So it's that's kind of a treat for everybody to hear some of the inside workings of how DEA functioned, and it wasn't all holding hands and singing songs.
I'll tell you one thing. Jack Lawn, God bless him, and great friend, one of the best directors we had. Some of them were horrible. And Jack Lawn, one day, I was in internal affairs, and he asked for me to come meet with him, and I went, and he goes, Frenchie, I need you to go to Dallas, Texas. He says, there's a problem, and you're the man for the job, and we're going to keep this quiet. And I went to Texas with another agent, And as a result, we interviewed the ASAC there, and who was using illegal trips with his family, with the G car, phony vouchers, etc. And when we sat down with him after he came in, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he came in and he goes, I heard you were coming. And we sat down, and my partner was there. And I said, we're here to investigate misuse of cars, trips, submission of trip vouchers, etc. And that's the allegation. I don't have to talk to you. I says, bullshit. You're going to talk to me. And he goes, no, I'm not. I says, okay. I said, now, here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow at 10:30, you're going to be at Internal Affairs in Washington, D.C. per order of the director. You can't order me around. I said, F you, goodbye, and have a day. We'll see you tomorrow. Well, he came to D.C. I heard screams and yells and all that, and he had been tipped off that we were coming. And Jack said to me, Frenchie, he had the word that you were coming. I said, yep. He says, who in the hell tipped him off? He sits across your office, your deputy. He says, thank you. And that's the way I operated. And Jack Lawn, to me, I found out later when we got the Ross Perot Award that our director refused to put us on the biggest cocaine conspiracy, which is Southern Comfort, which you want to discuss about.
Mm-hmm.
And I put in, I believe it was 55 people in for the Attorney General's Award to make the biggest cocaine conspiracy in the history of the United States. We submitted the requests. The director, an ex-FBI agent, Francis called me Bud, called up, talked to me when Ray Vincek, and says, I've got this here. You left out a person's name for the award. And he gave us the name, and he says, he will be named. I said, no, sir, he will not be named. He had nothing to do with this case. He was your horse holder, and now he's here as an ASAC? No, sir. I'm telling you. I says, have a good day, sir. Next thing, I got a call. Ross Perot says he wanted to meet us and recognize us for this case. And 5 of us went there to Texas, big dinner thing, and he presented us 5 Colt Combat Masterpiece weapons, all autographed in gold, and honored us and said, you guys created a historical case. And that was the end of it. And the director was not happy with me, and I said, too bad.
And I'm looking at your website, which we'll tell everybody about later, but it's PeteCharetteBooks.com. And I'm looking at the photo section, and I saw that picture of that .45 caliber, and I was wondering what the significance of that was, but now I know. You just explained that from Ross Perot. How about that?
That night when I got that weapon, after the event was over with, there was like 300 people there. A doctor came in to me, and he goes, Mr. Charette, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, sure. How are you? And I shook hands with him. He was a surgeon, brain surgeon. And he goes, I'm a Colt collector. Could I see it? I says, absolutely. And he's going, oh, my God, oh, my God. And he goes, I'll give you $10,000 for it right now. And I said, that's going to my grandson.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, my God, what a treasure. And now I found out it's worth a hell of a lot more. But it was an honor. So that's
special gift. Special gift.
And that's when I found out at that dinner that Jack Lawn was there, and we were walking into the dinner, and he goes, Janice. He grabs her and hugs her, my wife. And his wife grabs her. Oh, my God, Janice. And I go, excuse me, do you two know each other? He goes, she was my secretary in the FBI. She never told me.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Hey, players, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out, as always, on Tuesday. In the meantime, just a reminder that Game of Crimes is now posting interview videos on YouTube. You can find those at Game of Crimes Podcast. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com, where you'll find all our episodes, our guests' book list, merchandise, and more. And for more content, join us on patreon.com/gameofcrimes. I have several monthly episodes that range from silly to serious, so come on over and join the fun. In the meantime, everyone stay safe. I'll see you tomorrow for part 2.